Two. All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Imperium Dynamics hosted with Microsoft webinar on Dynamics 365 field service. Today, we're going to talk about how organizations move from that reactive service model to a predictive service model utilizing D365 for field service. This isn't, about layering AI onto those legacy processes, but it's about how field service built on Microsoft's Dataverse can enable those service operations to become more proactive and coordinated. So today, my name is Stewart. I'm a senior CSM here at Imperium Dynamics, a Microsoft business applications partner, and I'm joined with Josh Garza, who is a senior AI business solutions engineer at Microsoft. Thank you all for joining. I didn't mean to do that. Let's get into the agenda for the call. So we want to start with D365 Field Service Platform Foundation. We'll get into some of the operational challenges organizations are facing. We'll then define, what really is predictive service, what that means inside D365, not just conceptually, but operationally. We'll examine some of the costs of, continuing to be reactive, why this is a good platform, right? Why does this become a real platform architecture conversation? And we'll also talk about how the operating model shifts and when that intelligence gets embedded directly into your work execution. Lastly, we'll show a little bit with the predictive lifecycle. We'll do a live demo and we'll talk through some measurable business impact and success stories. So let's start with the platform, and I will pass it over to my friend Josh.
Thanks, Brock, and great to see everyone. Like Brock mentioned, I'm a solution engineer here at Microsoft covering Dynamics 365 field service, among some other applications. And today we'll be focusing on field service, but when people think of field service, they usually think of work orders. And while that's at the core of what field service applications do, even more central than that is really the underlying data, because without the data, there is no insights. There can be no, predictive maintenance. There can be no proactive engagement with your customers based on their needs and the needs of the equipment that they manage. So underneath field service and all of our customer engagement applications is what we call Dataverse. That's just our term for the underlying database that has all of the, work orders, contacts, accounts, asset history, etc., for all of our customer engagement applications. So with Dataverse, you have all of your applications using that same data model, meaning when you create a new contact, when you, update an address, let's say, that contact, that address will be updated throughout the platform, throughout every single application across the board, regardless of where it's being accessed and edited through. Now, we also extend our platform beyond just business applications through the Power Platform, and that includes components like Power BI for reporting and analytics, Copilot Studio for agent creation is the hot topic as of recent, but it also includes things like IVR for contact center, custom applications through Power Apps, automation workflows, and even custom websites for self-service scenarios, for example. And the Azure infrastructure supports all of that on the base layer. So going back to field service, it's all about the data and where that data is able to flow. And you'll see in today's conversation that with that underlying data, you're actually able to automate a lot of processes and a lot of components of a typical field service architecture. So that's where predictive data comes in, predictive service. And I'm going to pass it over to Brock to talk a little bit more about that.
Perfect. That was a great explanation of the platform. I think I actually learned something, Josh, so thank you for that. So what does predictive service actually mean? So when we talk about predictive service inside of Dynamics 365, like I just mentioned, we're really talking about moving from that failure-driven work to risk-driven work. And what I mean by that is waiting for something to fail versus analyzing the risk before it fails, right? So being able to, forecast accurately, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that, but operationally, you know, asset history and telemetry, that being connected to the service record within Dataverse is really how we're going to identify those patterns, right? We're going to define thresholds, whether it's your equipment, whether it's other assets within your, fleet, for example. That's going to really unlock that predictive service. And instead of, in the customer scenario, waiting for a customer to call, the system can, generate that work order before a failure occurs. So there's a lot of different moving parts there, but just that is kind of a prime example of, how predictive service can be applicable. The key here overall is that the work order entity becomes the trigger for the execution. So when you think about how your work orders come in and then everything that follows after, just think about a whole layer being before that of that predictive service model and being able to anticipate and forecast what's going to happen within your organization. So the last piece of that is, making sure that field service can activate not only that initial work order flow, but the rest. So things like scheduling optimization, parts validation, SLA tracking, all very, very important to your core business, and your customer needs and also your bottom line budget. So everything combined really creates a well-oiled machine, no pun intended, but yeah, does a great job. So let's get into some challenges we see with some of our customers. So here, this slide, you can see just four kind of different examples, right? So, most service organizations don't struggle because they lack reporting. They struggle because the execution is fragmented. So this slide really shows kind of four different POVs of, what's going on. So the dispatcher working outside of the scheduling engine, right? So they're sitting with, outdated tools, service systems, and they have a lot going on. Their asset data could live in, spreadsheets, or it could be really just all over the place. Then on the other side, let's look at a frontline technician. So they are out in the field, doing significant manual labor in most cases. There's a lot going on for them. They don't have the same problems as the dispatcher, right? Maybe they don't have access to a customer service history. Big problem. They're not going to be able to, see that, hey, this same repair, it's broken 5 times in the past year, right? So this is a reoccurring issue that, again, could be handled if there was a preventative, predictive model in place. Also, when we look at, customers, they want to be able to access that as well for their own preventative. So everything kind of goes together where you can look across the board, no matter whose viewpoint you're looking at. If you're, the frontline manager, they want to have access to those KPIs, the dashboards. They want to be able to see, how they can improve their service operations and really make strides to make sure that not only their customers are having a better experience, but also their employees. So I want to get into a little bit with the modernization life cycle. So I'll pass this one back over to Josh.
Yeah, and Brock, for a tangible example of what predictive service can look like. So a common scenario is, let's say, like an HVAC system for a large building. If there are sensors within that system that monitor things like humidity, moisture readings, monitor temperature, monitor different components of that system, and it doesn't have to be HVAC. This is applicable to any system that monitors specific measurements, and those measurements over time, looking for deviations and outliers essentially in what it's measuring, that's where predictive service comes in. So if, for example, going back to that HVAC scenario, there is a sudden peak in temperature and humidity, let's just say outside of the normal range, then the system will send an alert via Azure IoT alerts, and that you can set up that alert to trigger a work order to have a, HVAC tech dispatched and go inspect that HVAC system prior to it actually breaking down completely and the building being without air conditioning. So that's just one example
Very good example.
to put that into a real life, world scenario. But I want to talk about the different parts of the field service application. So Brock mentioned a few, different points of view, a few different roles that the application touches, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit deeper. So of course you have, your core field service employees, the boots on the ground, as I call them. So your technicians, you have your dispatcher, of course, that also schedules in most cases. You have your end customer that may or may not need to actually be submitting a request for a work order. And then you have your supervisors, service leaders, more managerial staff taking care of the oversight and operations in totality. So first, if a customer does reach out to schedule that work order, they're going to go through, say, a portal. They can go through any channel to submit their issues, and then the technician or the dispatcher will take the customer knowledge and the customer history and go ahead and schedule that work order, look at the available technicians, the available mobile employees, boots on the ground, and get that work order scheduled. When that time comes, the dispatcher will provide the mobile employee with everything they need from, let's say, do they have all the tools that they need on their truck? Do they have all of the different pieces of equipment? Do they even have the knowledge and the skills to be able to, replace a condenser coil in an HVAC system, for example? And the technician, of course, goes through the work order life cycle that we'll look at and completes those jobs and completes those tasks within the job step by step. And you'll see that in today's demonstration through the mobile experience. Lastly, of course, the service leaders are going to want not only insights, but they want data that feeds those insights to make decisions on a higher level. So they want to see things like, are work orders being closed in a timely manner? Is there a trend in any specific asset or maybe a specific, customer's assets that seems to be out of the norm, and use those insights and use that data to make decisions about the business moving forward. So next we're going to
go ahead.
I want to dive into the, I guess, topic of interest lately, which is AI. AI is everywhere. Everyone's hearing about it. Whether you like it or not, it's here, and it is going to radically transform every single organization, every single industry on this planet. This is similar to like the .com era. So when the internet first came out, think of it that way. And to be very clear, AI is not here to replace jobs. AI cannot go out and fix a condenser coil on an HVAC system. However, AI is here to be used as a tool to be able to know prior to that condenser coil being needing to be replaced, that there could be an issue that could maybe be mitigated prior to a total system failure. And so that's really where AI and Copilot within not only field service, but all of Microsoft's applications is delivering value, is the insights based on that data. Specifically within field service, it's gathering that data from those IoT sensors, from those connected devices. It's using that data and analyzing it to look for things like anomalies, let's say out of normal range temperatures or humidity readings. And then it's taking action on that anomaly to create a work order and help dispatchers and schedulers get a technician aligned to that work order to get the issue resolved before it becomes, like I said, a total system failure. And the risk of not doing something like this could actually be a lot more impactful on your company, and not only your company, but your customers as well. And I'll have Brock get into that a little bit here.
Absolutely. And I did want to touch on one piece that, I found valuable was when you're talking about the mitigation of an issue, right? Utilizing AI again in that preventative action. Sure, we could have a employee or you could have a whole team of employees monitoring, well, it wouldn't really make sense, but monitoring hundreds or thousands of all of those gauges and all of the sensors and everything that you have spread across, your fleet and your assets and your business as a in totality. But it doesn't logistically make sense when now the AI has entered the picture that it can simultaneously just capture everything, right? With one source of automation and that AI value. So I think that's just a way that I think about it. Whereas we're not replacing, we could do it, but I can do something else while we're not gonna sit and monitor thousands and thousands of gauges and sensors and things like that. It's just
It's
out
just
of
not feasible. And
not feasible, not, yeah.
if you really think about it, like I've worked with a customer, for example, that they are a security company that installs devices in corporate office buildings, that sort of environment. Think of things like any badge ID sensors that you need to badge into to access a room or an office or even the building. Any of those automated like hand lever things that come up to allow you into an area, or glass doors that open to also regulate access. But they also do things like elevators, door locks, door jams, security cameras in different rooms or areas. So that one company for one building can have hundreds of devices, with each of those devices sending, let's just say, to be conservative, one reading per second. So
Yeah.
you're talking thousands of data points for just one building, and they manage, hundreds of buildings across the nation. So we're easily into the millions of data points every single day, and it's just infeasible. It's not realistic. It's not feasible, and it's frankly impossible for humans to be able to, monitor that volume of data on a daily basis.
Yeah, I like how you put that into perspective too, with kind of at scale. When you think about smaller things, I was almost thinking a little bit bigger items to track. But yeah, there can be so many. But as we kind of transition that into, the hidden cost of the reactive, this plays perfectly onto it. So when we talk through, when your service is reactive, the variability increases, right? All those sensors can break. The emergency dispatches can, disrupt schedules. Let's say if one of those buildings, something goes down, no one can go to work until it's figured out, right? To get your parts expedited, that could take X amount of time. Do you have it in your inventory? Do you not? Is there overtime involved to, this building needs to be back up and running. We need to initiate some overtime. That's another hidden cost. The first time fix rates drop. So when you fix something the first time, you want it to be a good fix. You want it to last. But as you kind of get more and more reactive, whether it's just the nature of the machine or what you're working on, or just overall, maybe they're not used to fixing something like that, right? Maybe they got thrown into it, like he said, they don't have the proper knowledge. As that rate drops, again, another hidden cost. So overall, that reactive model is just inherently sequential, right? Something breaks, action happens. Where we're trying to take and educate companies to get to is the predictive model, which really is about stabilizing that service performance, which then will also stabilize costs. Let's talk a little bit about how it is a platform problem. So we've really talked about the service problem. Now let's talk about the platform problem. And this kind of ties back to the field service platform in general. So, predictive service really requires coordination across everything. So, you have your customer data, your asset data, you have your schedules, your inventory, reporting, work orders, things. I'm probably missing a bunch, but all of those elements typically live in separate systems. So you can have a CRM here, you can have automation systems here, and you use a different scheduling app. So not only is that a bunch of different tabs to toggle and go back and forth, it's confusing as an end user, but also your data is fragmented. So you can't have automation flows that work across the systems, or it makes it very, very difficult when everything kind of lives in those silos. So what Dynamics does a really good job of is, unifying that execution into that one operational backbone. So I think that's a good way to think about it if you want to use almost an anatomical approach to this, as it being the backbone, where all of your other limbs and muscle systems and organs can kind of stem off of this as being kind of that central piece for when work orders, assets, everything lives in that Dataverse backbone. The system can really act accurately, and it can also act across all of those other systems without any manual reconciliation. So that's really what turns everything into from kind of insights into action. So that's what we're looking to do here. I'm kind of repeating myself a lot, but I just want you to understand how important it is. So the operating model shift, again, let's just briefly touch on this piece. So what, reactive to predictive, Dynamics 365 for field service does a really good job of, being able to predict those changes. So here's a good example of just kind of walking through the customer call into a manual, dispatch, ordering those parts, and then let's say, it being executed and fixed. Whereas you can have that predictive model in place, and that's going to allow you to see those patterns, identify those risks, auto trigger solutions, and really create that orchestration system that we're trying to envision and develop for a lot of our customers. So I think at this point, well, it'd be a good time, Josh. You want to? I'll stop sharing and we'll let you showcase some of the system here.
Absolutely. So let me pull this up. All right. So I want to start off with just the dashboard view. We've been talking a lot about, connected field service and IoT alerts, things like that. I just put together a very quick dashboard just to show you an idea of what something like this could look like. So on the top left tile, you're looking at IoT alerts by different assets. So that's by different devices. And you can see that one particular device, thermostat number 1, and let's just say an office building, has 14 IoT alerts that it's logged. And it looks to be an anomaly. Something might be going on with thermostat number 1, so we can dive into that as well. And you're also able to see things like IoT alerts over time. And you can see that on the 24th of August, for example, there were a ton of IoT alerts. So we had, massive system failure on that day, more than likely. So diving into the work orders, you're able to get an easy view of all of your work orders that are currently either scheduled, unscheduled, in progress. You're able to see what service accounts, what, companies or customers those work orders are for, and the priority levels. If a work order is already scheduled, you'll see the resources, the people, and parts that are needed for that work order. And then you'll also see what we call incident types. And I want to really hone in on incident types. As I'll show throughout the demo, you're going to see that incident type really drives a lot of the data behind automating parts of the work order creation process. And as we dive into that deeper, I'm going to dig into a quick Power BI dashboard just so you can visualize this. You're able to actually visualize any view within Dynamics 365 applications and see things in a graph format that's a little bit easier, to ingest large amounts of data. And this is using Power BI within Dynamics 365. So you're able to control your filters, control which data you want insights about, and gather some information that way as well. Now, drilling into a particular work order here. So we have, as you can see, incident type door is not locking. And this is going to drive a lot of the rest of the work order components that you'll see. And I'll show you a little bit more about this incident type later in today's demo. But a door not locking at the wharf. So we'll pretend the wharf is, an office building and it's in need of repair. So a summary of the work order: the door in the south entrance is not locking and there's suspected hardware malfunction that needs a technician to be on site to repair that. You're able to see contacts for the wharf and then requirements for that specific work order. Now, you can find availability to book here as well using Copilot. I'm actually going to show the schedule board and show you an overview and how easy it is also to drag and drop like an emergency work order, let's say. So before I do that, wanted to show a little bit more information on the work order itself. The location of the wharf is here in a map view, leveraging Bing Maps, but also has the capability to be integrated with things like Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze. And you're able to see things like the price list for any components that are needed for that work order, as well as functional locations, meaning the wharf could be, a set of office buildings like a campus that has multiple buildings, and this particular work order is in relation to a door not locking in Pier Building 4 on the first level. So your technicians, your mobile employees really have a granular view of exactly where they need to go, because the last thing you want is a technician arriving on site and having no idea where they need to be in order to service the asset. Now, under the same work order, you're able to see things like products and services, tasks, and all related notes to this work order. In this case, for the door not locking, we have a door strike shim kit that is needed and an electric strike with a inventory number of ES110. And you'll see the estimated quantities that are needed and the estimated prices of those components. And all of this is being derived from the incident type. You're also able to see the types of services that are going to, need to be provided based on the information in this work order. Now, when it comes to actually completing the work order, you have to follow steps in a certain order most of the time for most, work-related incidents. So here under the task tab of the work order, we're able to see exactly what those steps are, how long each of them takes, and progress as we start to complete. We can take notes on any of those incidents, or we can, just mark it as complete if it's a quick inspection as well. Going back into assets, so that south entrance access control panel at the wharf access, that is the asset for that particular customer, the wharf that we're servicing today. And if you'll remember, that's on level 1 of the Pier 4 building. So you're able to really drill into all of these assets, get a complete view of the history, any linked knowledge articles as well. And that is all fed through, again, the incident type. So incident types are core to Dynamics 365 field service. Think of these as categorizations of different common work order issues that a company or a business would run into. So things like, maybe they need some lawn care servicing, or a security camera is offline, a door is not locking, like in this case, a fire sprinkler inspection, and the list goes on. But I'm going to drill into specifically the door not locking. You're able to see a description of, what that issue actually means, details as far as knowledge articles that are linked. Here is where, when you're setting up your incident types, you'll be adding things like the products and services that are needed for each of these incident types. And the service tasks are that checklist sort of view that you saw on the work order earlier. So you're able to create service tasks for different types of work orders. And I also want to mention quickly, this can be done in a hierarchy form of, incident types as well. So what I mean by that is you can have parent incident types and child incident types, so that you can not only specify, okay, it's a door not locking, but it is actually an issue with the jamming mechanism, or it's an issue with the RFID scanner for that door. You can get as granular or keep it as high level and as broad as your business requires. Lastly, one of the things that I think most organizations overlook is characteristics and skills. So characteristics meaning, what is needed of a technician or of a mobile employee in order to get through a specific work order. So for an issue like this door not locking, a characteristic of a mobile technician might be, they need access control experience, and they need to at least be intermediate on their knowledge of access control, and then also have basic troubleshooting knowledge as well. All of these components of the incident type really help to automate all parts of field service and of the work order process. So everything that I just covered here with an incident type helps Copilot to automatically schedule work orders and find the appropriate technician or mobile employee that is available to work on those specific work orders. Now, I mentioned resources. Resources, again, can be anything from human resources to non-human resources. In this case, we're looking at, characteristics of human resources. So we can see which resources have which characteristics, what their rating values are. And this can include things like, a commercial driver's license, any sort of certification that possibly needs to be renewed on a regular basis. All of that information can be, tied into your HR system as well, but also kept up to date in field service in order to help facilitate not only ongoing training and, recertification prior to like a certificate expiring, but also facilitates work order booking and resource booking for each of those work orders. You can also connect your ERP or your supply chain management software, which we see a lot of organizations do, and also manage that part of the solution within field service. So we can see exactly where each of these components are and how many there are on hand, how many we might potentially need. And I think one nice thing about this part of the solution that typically isn't found in a lot of field service solutions, it's more of a supply chain feature, is setting automatic reorder limits. Meaning, let's just say we need a condenser on all of our trucks, at least one, so that at any point, if there's an emergency work order, we can dispatch a truck from a nearby location to go work on that condenser on an HVAC unit. So if any single truck gets below one, or if the main warehouse drops below a certain quantity, if any warehouse drops below a certain quantity, then the system will automatically reorder and submit a purchase order for that condenser product. Now, this also ties into other components of ERP, as you can imagine, finance applications. But all that to say, field service is a very robust system that can integrate with all of your existing systems today to really give you a complete end-to-end view of everything you need for field service operations. Now, what you're looking at here is the schedule board. And this is what I really wanted to spend some time on. We're looking at a calendar view of work orders that are required. And then we're also looking at a map view of different technicians, where they are, in this case, around the Redmond or Seattle, Washington area, and where each of their work orders are that they need to work on. But in the case for today, let's go ahead and find some time. Looks like some people have some time later this afternoon, and we can actually look at unscheduled work orders and get some of these scheduled. So looks like there's an urgent one here. We can sort by priority. And let's just filter by urgent. And looking at these, you can determine, which work orders are necessary to book right now based on things like time limit, maybe the service account. If you have different sorts of service level agreements that need to be satisfied, that can also, play a part in things like emergency scheduling. So let's just go ahead and schedule one of these work orders. And you'll notice there is a pop-up there that this is outside the promised time window, so it might not satisfy that SLA requirement. However, if we confirm with the customer that we'll get a technician on site as soon as we possibly can, it looks like Fernanda is available at first before any of the other technicians or groups of technicians like these Fabricam contractors. So let's get her in there to work on that urgent work order. She does have another one, but I'm actually going to move that over to the Fabricam contractors team for them to take care of that work order that she was initially scheduled for, so that she can work on the urgent one. Now, all of this can be automated, of course, and that's a common question that we get. However, before AI and Copilot and all sorts of automation, we did, schedulers and dispatchers did have to do things manually. And I think an underutilized or underemphasized point of today's modern applications is the flexibility to still perform those manual tasks if and when they are ever needed. So for emergency work orders, for example. And And I just wanted to show you a component of what that would look like. And one last thing I'll touch on is you're able to, as a dispatcher or scheduler, set up different views. And that's what you see up here. So I have different views for different, teams, different geographies, different work order types, whether they're unscheduled or not, and can drill into those based on the view and the map and filters down here as well. Now, I covered a lot in a very short amount of time. However, I wanted to emphasize that Dynamics 365 Field Service is a robust application, but at the end of the day, so what? What is driving organizations to modernize any part of their technology, landscape? And the answer to that really comes back to measurable business impact. So, Brock, I'll ask you to reshare the deck and we can talk about that. Perfect. So, when it comes to actual results, these are some of the results conducted by Forrester, not an internal assessment. This was by an external company, but these are the results that Forrester found on customers that have implemented Dynamics 365 Field Service. So typically, obvious financial benefits, but 6-month payback time. I mean, that is pretty quick for solutions that typically, are hanging around a business for years and years. You have anything from productivity gains to efficiency boosts, but also administrative savings. Because if you think about every step of the work order life cycle, and especially when it comes to things like scheduling, dispatching, that administrative side of things can really take up a lot of time for an office manager, let's say. So I have worked with an organization that is still doing the admin side of things, very manually. So they have a cork board, dry erase board, and post-it notes that they're using to schedule work orders. And it's set up on, a weekly basis based on who's available and what needs to be done in the order that it needs to be done. But that's not an efficient way for the office admin, office manager to use their time, as they still have to keep answering phones from customers who are calling in to report even more work orders that need to be, queued up. So the impact, the business impact of an application like Dynamics 365 Field Service is vast, and it's felt not only at the top level, but at the boots on the ground level as well. I think one thing that I found interesting working with that same customer was a lot of the frontline employees didn't see the value or didn't necessarily realize how much easier their lives would be if they had everything in a digital format on an iPad, let's say. So now with Dynamics 365 Field Service, they have all of the knowledge that they could possibly need from their internal knowledge base, as well as manuals for specific pieces of equipment, all the way to specific instructions on how to go about resolving a work order or a specific issue in a step-by-step format through components like they're able to see when they get a lunch break, able to see how much driving time they have ahead of them for the next job. They're able to see all sorts of things that just frankly are not captured easily on pen and paper and not captured efficiently in that manner either. So that's one way that I've seen this really drive tangible results on the ground level. And of course, on the leadership level, you get the insights that come with that live data. And I also want to talk about more specific customer references. And I'm going to pass it over to Brock to talk about other customers.
Absolutely. And I think that piece, when it comes to every person of the organization getting affected, positively affected, seeing those results, sometimes it's not an immediate realization, right? Sometimes, maybe some of the boots on the ground have been doing this job for 30 years. They don't need your fancy software, but really when you get over that kind of tribal knowledge almost of like, hey, this is going to work better. Here's why. You kind of get through that piece. Then once everyone realizes it, it can be very, very good for everyone involved. So we wanted to show just a few examples here of customers that have had success, they've had business impact, and I want to really hone in on this is across industries, right? We see, this isn't all just HVAC companies like Josh has been talking about there. That was a good example, but we can see it extend throughout organizations across many industries and across the world, right? So they're all doing a little bit of kind of different processes, and they're manufacturing different things, but the common theme really is that consolidation, right? So we want to bring service execution into one system, and we want to allow automation to operate across that system. So that's kind of the 2 points I want to hone in on when it comes to talking about field service and just everything that it can do for you. So I appreciate everyone taking the time. We just want to close with we appreciate you hopping in, listening to what we had to say. And yeah, if you want to learn anything more about it, see it in action, we're happy to hop on a call and discuss further. Or you just have any random questions about it. Happy to help. So appreciate the time today, Josh. Very good job, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.